Welcome to you all. I am Rijntje van Haringen and I'm your moderator for today. We're very happy to have all of you with us. We're broadcasting from the Swedish embassy, from the Swedish residence in The Hague. And our host today is Ambassador Markovic from Sweden, and she will share her opening remarks with us now.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear audience in The Hague and all over the globe, I'm so proud to host this online discussion about women entrepreneurs taking place here at the Swedish residence in The Hague. As an ambassador for Sweden, I'm also representing the Swedish feminist government. Sweden is committed to promote gender equality with the policy agenda that combat inhibitive gender roles and structures, so that women and men, boys and girls, can live their lives to their full potential. It's a matter of recognizing gender inequality, that women and men do not have access to resources and power on equal terms, and committing to make a change to that. To bring about change, different and diverse actors need to pull in the same direction. In Sweden, step by step, reforms were made to enable and empower women. Parental leave, individual taxation, affordable childcare were individual measures in Sweden that together made change possible to the benefit of society. And I use the term benefit on purpose, because gender equality is not only right, it's also smart. Increasing gender equality has positive effects on economic growth, on health, on education, and welfare. Today, we are going to highlight women entrepreneurs in low-income countries and address the impact of COVID-19 on women's economic justice and rights. I first would like to remind us that this year, 2020, is a milestone year for international gender equality efforts. UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on Women, Peace and Security, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and UN Women are all commemorating significant anniversaries. The most significant anniversary is the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration. The Fourth World Conference on Women in Beijing in 1995 established once and for all that women's rights are human rights. Unfortunately, still today, this is not yet self-evident. Despite gratifying achievements, much remains to be done, both internationally and nationally. Sweden is determined, together with and like-minded countries and actors, to scale up our efforts and shoulder more responsibility to tackle the deteriorating global situation for gender equality. This is why Sweden has submitted a letter of intent to UN Women to lead the Global Generation Equality Action Coalition for Economic Gender Equality in 2020 until 2025. The Action Coalition for Economic Gender Equality is part of the Generation Equality Campaign, which is led by UN Women, France and Mexico, that will both highlight and accelerate implementation of the Beijing Declaration. The Action Coalition for Economic Gender Equality is one of 6 action coalitions covering different aspects of the work to advance women's and girls' rights. I hope that this afternoon will present an occasion to exchange thoughts, ideas, and experiences that will inspire us all to take new steps together. We have just been waiting too long. Investments in gender equality are investments in the future. Half of the world's talent must have the opportunity to blossom. And let me now hand over to my dear friend and colleague and partner, Lisa Helfand, to take it from here. Lisa, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Annika. I'm so glad to be able to join you all today virtually. With the COVID restrictions starting to lift, there's a temptation to think we are going to snap back to normal. And sadly, that's not the case. We need to remember that there will be significant ongoing impacts, and we need to be ready to face them. As we've learned, COVID has increased social and economic pressures on women. Industries that are disproportionately made up of women, like the service, educational, and care-based sectors, have been hit very hard. And with social isolation, there's an even greater pressure on women to perform the unpaid household work they often do in childcare. The impacts of COVID aren't gender blind, so our response to COVID cannot be gender blind either. Canada is committed to help bring down the barriers to women's economic empowerment. We believe that in order to respond to COVID, we cannot lose sight of these priorities. We've pledged $6 million to the International Fund for Agricultural Development. This is money that will help address COVID-related disruptions to small-scale agricultural producers in African countries, with a particular focus on women. This support is consistent with the Canadian feminist foreign policy and with Canada's belief that promoting gender equality and empowering women is key to building an inclusive and prosperous world. Given the drastic effects on the economies worldwide due to COVID, we will need to work together to find effective strategies to support women's enterprise development in low-income communities. None of us can do this alone, and that's why I'm pleased we've come together today with such a diverse group of participants to continue this important work. NGOs, governments, business, we all have a role to play. I'm particularly interested in learning from the Women Mean Business report, which I hope can help guide us in our efforts. And with that, I'll pass things over to our moderator, Antje.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you both, the ambassadors of Sweden and Canada in the Netherlands, for their important words to give start to this webinar. There are actually hundreds of people watching right now, and they include some of the women entrepreneurs that we have been working with in this Women Mean Business enterprise that we have been involved in over the past few years. A special welcome to the women entrepreneurs that are joining us. We would have loved to have you with us today. For several reasons that was not possible, very obviously, but we're happy to have you here. So today we will highlight some of the pathways that we found to successfully support women entrepreneurs in fragile and complex contexts. We will have with us Solange Hague, who's program manager at CARE Nederland. She will join us at the table soon to share stories of women entrepreneurs, what they need to successfully develop their enterprise, and also how they are impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Then after that, we will have an international expert panel that will address also the impact of COVID-19 on the economic empowerment of women and discuss with us next steps in supporting women entrepreneurs in becoming successful in their business. We are very excited about the panelists that will join us today. They are Jorim Schrave, he's Director of Impact and ESG at the Dutch Development Bank, FMO. We will also have Marcus Goldstein, who's the lead of who is the lead economist on Africa at the World Bank. And we will have with us Sophia Schwegmann, who was recently appointed Secretary General of CARE International. It will be possible for all of you participants to provide us with your questions through a link that was sent to you in the confirmation email so that we can take those into account when we have the panel discussion. And now, before Solange joins me here to discuss the report on Women Mean Business, we will have a short film for you, the Women Mean Business film, that features women entrepreneurs from around the globe and that have participated in our program. We look forward to an inspiring event.
I'm going to leave comment. You said you don't have to Changanam Yan. Probably pin. Yeah, I cannot go on Plazan. The Maya Colezu. I'm coach. I buy you. But where will the foreign soon? Oh, you won't cut up. I'm going to Yakum there. Pierre, you walk them on lap. Okay.
அப்படிதான் பார்ப்பேன். ஆனால் இப்போதைய சமூகத்தில் அப்படி இல்லையோ, அப்படி இல்லை, மாறிக்கொண்டு வருது இப்போ.
الهدف منه هو إنه نحولهم هم والسيدات من إنهم يكونوا عبء اقتصادي على أهاليهم لإنهم يكونوا مصدر دخل، لأنه هذا بيثبت إنه بغير العلاقة بين الرجل والمرأة بتصير على أساس تعاون، مشاركة وحوار.
No es fácil que las mujeres obtengamos un préstamo. Te piden demasiados requisitos. Con mi asociación estamos demostrando que nosotras las mujeres sí podemos salir adelante con un negocio.
ngon wa sel kam lolu maso ma ba su kaga ta me ba ta lolna
பெண்களை இப்போ பெரிய பதவிகளில் பொறுப்பான இடங்களுக்கு போட்டு அப்படி அவங்களுக்கு ஒரு முன்னுரிமையை கொடுத்தா அதை சிறுவர்கள் அதை பார்த்து நடந்து கொள்வாங்க நல்ல
احنا بنعلم البنات انه اي شيء الولاد بيقدروا يعملوه هم كمان بيقدروا يعملوه. استثمروا فيه.
Invierte en mí.
usi de fa chawena
In the meantime, Solange Hague has joined me here at the table, and she will share more with us about the Women in Enterprise program that was funded by CARE's long-standing and much appreciated partner, the H&M Foundation. Welcome, Solange.
Thank you so much.
You're here to tell us a little bit more about the program. What did you do? How did you go about this?
Well, we started first by analyzing the needs of women from low-income communities, women living in poverty, and what would they need to be able to start and run their own businesses. And based on what they told us, we developed programming that included developing skills that they needed, both hard skills, technical skills, but also soft skills, access to financial products and services that they needed to be able to buy raw materials, to buy the equipment that they needed. But also realizing that there were barriers that they were facing when trying to register their business. So we started working with governments as well on trying to facilitate these processes and make them easier and find ways for policies to be more supportive of women entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. And also working at the household level. There were a lot of barriers that women felt they faced because they weren't allowed to carry out certain type of activities, certain types of businesses. Fadwa, for example, from Jordan, wanted to start a women-only taxi service, and all her brothers were against her.
And so, getting to know all these barriers, you adjust your intervention to whatever presented itself in the program.
Exactly, we did, and we found that in each place there were different needs that needed to be met. There were different types of the trainings needed to be adapted to the level of education in each of the contexts.
So after you've worked on this program for 3 years, what can you tell us are the results that you've obtained?
Well, we have really exciting, I'm excited about the results that we've seen out of this program. We've seen that there's been a 91% increase in daily enterprise earnings from these women. And this has a huge impact on their lives.
Doubled.
Mm-hmm.
Practically.
We've also seen that bank account ownership has more than doubled. Women are able have bank accounts, are able to save money in safe places. We've also seen that there's been a 33% increase of women in leadership positions.
Wow, was that an objective that you had, or is that a side effect?
It was one of our objectives that we hoped to be able to achieve, that by women participating more in public life, in economic life, that they do start making decisions and realizing that they can be in these leadership positions to be able to make decisions.
And that actually happened. That's fantastic. So it sounds like a very successful program with almost doubling income, with women with access to savings accounts. Is there some success formula behind this? What are the components? What do you need to make this happen?
Well, what we did was as we were building this program, we brought together all the teams in all the different countries to see what was happening in each country, what was similar, what could we learn from each other, but what could we also see across the board that was needed so that we could start to understand what do we need to include in this type of programming for it to be effective. And it was a really great kind of built from the ground up process of realizing that we needed 5 main components to this type of programming. So what we needed was interventions that had to do with skills strengthening, and not just on how to run your business, which is important, and on financial literacy, which is really important, but also soft skills of knowing myself, making decisions, believing in oneself. The second component is around access to finance and capital, to be able to buy raw materials, to be able to buy equipment. Women face huge barriers in being able to access financing. So this was a key component as well, figuring out how to do this informally and formally, by strengthening groups and networks, by women working together in groups, participating in larger networks at local levels, regional levels, national levels, and also by improving the business enabling environment, increasing access to markets, working with governments, and last but not least, engaging men and boys in this process, because this isn't something that's done in isolation. There's entrenched gender norms that are there that we also would like to improve, and because in the end, this isn't just about women becoming entrepreneurs, this is about having a positive impact on gender equality.
So rather than a success formula, it's a whole menu of things, and you need to figure out what the right recipe is for each situation.
I would say so, and what we've really found through this is that, not to be repetitive, but women mean business when they do business. They reinvest their income in their businesses. Yeah. They're proud of them. They believe in them. They also use their own savings for their businesses to grow. Yeah. And we've really seen that these are sustainable businesses that can continue on.
Great. So if looking back at all that, what is the biggest lesson that you've learned that the women entrepreneurs have taught you?
I think the biggest lesson I've learned is the positive knock-on effect that women role models can have. I visited Ivory Coast a couple years ago, and I met one of the role models that we work with, who started from very little and now has a large farmers cooperative. And she works with the women in our program, motivating them, sharing stories, mentoring them. And I saw her in a government meeting advocating for the need for adapted financial products and services for women. And later, the next day, I visited a village and saw women entrepreneurs that we work with demanding from the chief of the village that they need more access to land to be able to farm more.
Inspired by somebody that women can actually identify with.
Exactly.
Fantastic. So soon we will watch a video where one of the women that you've worked with, and I think she's a role model as well, Dorcas from Sierra Leone, will speak with us a little bit about her experience. She's now struggling as a result of the pandemic with her business and trying to help people in her community. And there's a question that she asked, it's not included in the video, I'm going to ask it to you now, where she said, what can you do now under these circumstances to offer us help and to get past the crisis that we're currently in?
Yeah.
What would you tell her?
Dorcas's question is really timely and extremely appropriate. But I think she's speaking on behalf of all the women entrepreneurs in our program that we work with and beyond that. We've seen that in Guatemala, 96% of the women that we work with don't have enough money for food right now since the start of the crisis. In Sri Lanka, 90% of women say their income has decreased. This is a huge problem. And I think a lot needs to be done. What we're doing right now within the scope of the program that we have is we've made some adaptations to provide grants and food for vulnerable families that really aren't able to satisfy their food needs currently. We're also working on providing masks and hygiene equipment so that businesses can continue running. And in some cases, businesses have adapted to start producing masks that they can have as an income-generating activity. And one specific example is from Peru. In Peru, the lockdown is going to be lifted next month, but the government has said that they need to have biosafety protocols in place. So we're going to be working with the businesses to develop their biosafety protocols so that they can get started right away.
So women's enterprises themselves become a response from them to the crisis and to be resilient in facing it. That's really fantastic. Thank you so much, Solange, for your insights. We will now look at two women entrepreneurs, Basma from Jordan and Dorcas from Sierra Leone that we just mentioned. And due to the global pandemic, unfortunately, it was impossible to welcome them to the Netherlands, which is what we would have wanted. Instead, they were interviewed by Maria Biestedt, who's program manager at H&M Foundation, with whom we have a long-standing, very fruitful and inspiring relationship of working together on this program. She did this prior to the event, and we will watch a film about that now.
Well, I've heard so much about you and your great work.
You're such an inspiration and a great role model as well. So
thank you so much.
So my name is Maria Biestedt, and I am the program manager at the H&M Foundation,
which is the donor for the partnership and the program together with CARE.
My name is Dr. Taylor Tucker, the founder and the coordinator for Real Women in Action.
My name is Basma Nazir, and I'm the founder of Youth Initiative.
Real Women has got different segments. We have the vocational school, we have the restaurant, and we also have an organization. We're working with women and children.
Youth stands for the words threads. My work mainly is with refugee women, especially in Baqa refugee camp. We work more on economic, social, and cultural empowerment for those women.
Thank you. That sounds really good.
What would you like to see from decision makers and investors?
Do we need trainings? I mean, we have the enthusiasm to do the thing, but we don't have the full skill, right? Women need to be well trained. Women need to be monitored and left on their own so that they will build up their businesses and stand strong to support their family, their community, and keep the business going.
Yeah. Training is so important. Of course, that's I completely understand.
What I would like to see more from decision makers is the focus on social enterprises. I know profit is very important at the end of the day, but I would like to focus more on the social part rather than just the profit part.
Yeah, social return on investments. It should really be part of how they measure success. I agree with you. What needs to happen to support women entrepreneurs during the pandemic, would you say?
So digital literacy really helps the women because they work from home. It's hard for them to actually promote their businesses. During COVID-19, it has proved to be the only way to sell, even in Jordan.
Yeah, like I said, most businesses are almost closed down. Some are crumbling. I think I'm one of those affected, in fact, during this COVID. I had a restaurant, but because business is not too good with me, so I've closed the restaurant. What next? If this thing continues, what will happen to women? So I think training is paramount and financial support are paramount. Material support are paramount for women so that women will grow.
That's very good advice. This was really inspiring to hear you tell more about what you do and how you help other women in your community. Thank you so much.
In the meantime, with me at the table is Jorim Schrave. He is the Director Impact and ESG at FMO, which is the Dutch Development Bank. And ESG, for those who are not familiar with the term, stands for Environmental, Social and Governance Aspects of the bank's investments. Jorim, welcome.
Thank you.
We are very happy to have you here because we'd like to discuss the impact of investing in women entrepreneurs and what can be done to support women during this crisis. So my first question to you would be, we know that FMO and other development finance institutions, FMO also through its clients, the financial institutions, you're supporting clients and partners that are actually suffering from the impact of COVID-19. Can you share with us how you, by doing that, also support women entrepreneurs in particular? How does that work?
Sure. Yeah, so maybe to start with a very specific example of one of our clients in Pakistan. They actually set up a program, Don't Let Corona Put You Out of Business. Mm-hmm. Because what I found was that actually the women entrepreneurs were affected much more than the male ones. Mm. Because typically they are in sectors like retail, hospitality that are really mobility impacted. And often, they also struggle with new ways of developing their businesses in COVID times, because the client tried to move to digital online. But they found actually that the female entrepreneurs typically have less access to mobile phone technology, etc., than the men. So they set up this program, and they actually applied to FMO. We've set up an emergency capacity development program for COVID times, and they applied to us for an emergency grant to help the Don't Let Corona Put You Out of Business program, which we thought was a very good opportunity actually to help their female entrepreneurs through the crisis. And it essentially consists of two elements. So one is really to help their clients with training and how to deal with these particular instances. And the other part is a digitization effort to help the female clients deal and move part of their business where possible online.
Okay. Yeah. And that is a training program. And then there's also additional funding for women to invest in their business?
Yeah, correct. So that is the normal business that FMO does in normal times and also now, of course, is actually the financing of female entrepreneurs through our financial institutions clients.
And that continues, and additionally to that you do capacity building work. Do you see that women need to change their businesses? Are you supporting them in that? What effects have you seen? What impacts have you seen of the crisis?
Yeah, so that's one of the harder things, I think. What we see is that often the female entrepreneurs are already a bit more vulnerable than average. So they're not in a position to simply set up a completely new business.
Right.
So it's really about trying to help them in their existing business to preserve income and sit out the crisis, if you will.
Yeah.
I think that's really where the efforts are at.
And what do you think needs to happen additionally at some point? I can see how for now it's like make sure you come through the crisis. What have you seen in your work also before COVID-19? Is there any specific support that you think women entrepreneurs should receive that they don't receive right now? Because there is a gap. And there is such a huge potential that we've seen, right, in the report that Solange presented. There is such a clear business case for it. What keeps us from investing massively in women entrepreneurs?
Yes, it's an excellent question. I mean, just I have to talk a little bit about the gap, because you're quite right, it is absolutely huge. And so if you look at the SDGs at FMO, we have a nice slogan now. We have until 2030 to achieve the SDGs, so we want to make the challenge of this decade the achievement of the century.
Yeah.
But if you look at gender, it would actually be the achievement of 2.5 centuries, because we know from the World Economic Forum that it takes 250 years to close the gender gap at the current rate.
Yeah.
So we better actually speed up and fast.
Yeah.
So we're very eager to do that, and there's a massive gap to fill. So it's about 320 billion of finance that's needed to close the gap for female SMEs only. What's getting in the way? I think we also need to be honest about the hurdles. There are real hurdles for female entrepreneurs from culture, education, legislation.
Yeah.
The opportunity is big. So 22% of women in Africa, for example, developing countries, are entrepreneurs. But typically they also are entrepreneurs out of necessity.
Yeah.
So the Western way of financing entrepreneurs to go and look for the unicorns, that's not going to work. We better look for the zebras, which are the smaller businesses. But the good thing is they're also less risky. And that's actually what banks like. So that's why we work with our banking clients to finance them. An example is Banco Solidario, which is in Ecuador. It's a really leading client in this area. I think we'll hear more about Ecuador later in the panel, which is nice. And they finance entrepreneurs, and then we complement it again with capacity development to really tailor the offering to what the female entrepreneurs need. And also I think we saw in the film, they need specific training, they need a special approach. And I think if we do that, then we can leverage, because FMO with 10 billion can never close the 320 billion gap. So we need to bring those banks on board.
Yeah, and prepare women for being able to then access other types of loans.
Exactly.
I completely agree with you.
Exactly.
And I also think, and from what we just heard from Jodim, there's an effort from FMO in terms of investment. I think there's others, and we've heard Solange with efforts to support also on capacity development. It sounds like it should be more of a joint effort and not all of us trying on our own. So
I cannot agree more. SDG 17, let's collaborate.
Let's collaborate. I think that's maybe a nice bridge to our next panelist, which is Marcus Goldstein, that we have on the screen already. Marcus is lead economist for Africa at the World Bank, and he is contributing from Washington. Welcome, Marcus, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. So I work in something which is called the Africa Gender Innovation Lab, where we're trying to build the evidence base on what works to improve gender equality. And so, should I just jump in and
maybe it will be interesting. Yeah, please. Maybe it will be interesting to hear from you, Marcus, is some of the impact that you are seeing on women entrepreneurs in the geographies that you work in, and share how the World Bank contributes to kind of building that solid response that women need under COVID-19.
Excellent. Okay, and I'll draw on some of the evidence that we've got coming out of the Innovation Lab, which I think helps add to what we've heard from Jürgen just now.
That would be great.
So, look, let's start with the closures. And here, I think one thing that we're seeing, we're doing a survey, a global survey with Facebook, where they send surveys to the people who have Facebook business pages. And to echo what people have been saying so far, we are seeing across the world, in the US and in Ghana, that more female businesses are closing than men. We're seeing some variation across countries, and I think that's interesting. In some countries, like Kenya, there is a gender gap, and trying to understand that is important. But there are likely two reasons why, and we've heard these earlier from Ambassador Helflin, for example. The sector that women are concentrated in, those are more hurt by lockdown measures. The second is the lower capital base. And when we looked at enterprises in Africa in a previous study, we found that even adjusting for the business size, women have a lower credit base than men. And so in these times when they're closed, they have a smaller cushion. In the lab, we're working with a group of female entrepreneurs in Ethiopia. We did a survey with them a couple of weeks ago. We found 64% of them closed. The good news is many of them say it's temporary. But again, this credit story comes through. 24% of them said they're having trouble paying their loans, and 70% said that they could use more credit to get through the crisis. So what can we do in response? I think at the World Bank more generally, I think globally, I think about it at sort of two levels, which are overlapping. For the poor women, for the micro businesses, here we can think of things like cash transfers. So here's some interesting evidence from a Catholic Relief Services program in northern Nigeria. And here in northern Nigeria, we saw very low female labor force participation in general. The Catholic Relief Services came in with a set of cash transfers, decent sized cash transfers. 1 year later, the women who got the cash transfers we saw were starting businesses, their assets were increased, household was better off. What's really interesting is that 2 years later, extremely vulnerable women in those same communities who had not gotten the cash transfers were starting businesses. And these were businesses that were complementary, right? So you had somebody doing oil processing, and now you had someone opening a cooking business. So there was this kind of village level growth, which started with those seeds that came from cash transfers. In Niger, we have the government doing a different kind of program. This is a graduation program that the World Bank has been supporting. BRAC, the NGO, that was where the initial idea came from. And here we're thinking about cash transfers on a regular basis, but also things like VSLAs, Village Savings and Loans Associations, training, which includes both the business practices, but also those social-emotional skills that Solange was talking about earlier, and then a big lump sum transfer for investment. And here we're seeing, again, this big increase in women's businesses. But what's interesting in Niger is that the government, it's a poor government with not a lot of money, so they're trying different variations of the program, this entire package, but they're also trying the training component and the cash component only. Mm-hmm. And what we're seeing is business starts across all three variations. Obviously, the full package gets you more, but these other two more lean versions are working with different impacts as we might expect. But it's exciting to see different, more affordable, scalable versions working. So that's for the business starts and the poor communities, the micro businesses. Then Jürgen was just talking more also about the established business. And here, indeed, there is a problem in accessing growth capital. Now, where does that problem come from? It comes from the lower level of assets that women have, right? They don't have the collateral to pledge for these $1,000, $2,000 loans that are going to help their businesses reach the next level. So here we have to think about rolling out, and I think the COVID environment's providing an interesting time to try new things because there's sort of this thirst for innovation. We have to roll out products that reduce the need for collateral. So things like cash flow based lending, right. Equity type products, alternatives to collateral. The second thing I would push for just quickly is business training, but not as usual. Mm. Solange talked about the importance of these other skills. And in Togo, we tried these two kinds of business training, one that was psychology based and the other that was more business practices. Mm-hmm. For the female entrepreneurs, we saw 40% higher training, 40% higher profit, from this psychology based training. So really pushing on these skills and helping women reach the next level.
Right. Yeah, very interesting, Marcus. What with so much already solutions inside, what would you suggest to accelerate action at this point and to reach more women?
Yeah, I think I think these two approaches, thinking about providing these cash grants to help women get started, or cash transfers, these kind of programs, or the more extensive graduation programs, and then coming in with these higher level, because we don't want, in Africa, when you look at the data, women are concentrated among the small and micro, and there's this missing middle for capital to grow. And so hitting both of those at the same time, I think will make a huge difference for the recovery from COVID and the growth of these economies, as well as gender equality.
Thank you so much. We'll get back to you when we get questions from our audience. I think, again, what Marcus shared with us, same as with Joram, it points to the required collaboration between different actors so that jointly we can cover the whole spectrum that women entrepreneurs need to go from startup and grow and continue to develop. We have yet another person on our panel, and I'm very proud also to introduce her. This is Sophia Schwegmann. She was appointed recently Secretary General at CARE International, but she brings over 25 years of experience in international development and humanitarian work. And she is joining us today from Quito in Ecuador. Welcome, Sophia. We're so delighted that you can be with us today. I have several questions for you. Let's start with the fact that you just took up this role, and that was in the middle of a pandemic. How would you describe, and you're in a country that's currently very hard hit by the pandemic, how would you describe the impact of this crisis and what can be done to alleviate some of the worst impacts, particularly on women entrepreneurs and women's economic empowerment?
Thank you, Ranja. And in terms of the impact, we've all seen the figures, so I won't dwell on them, but it's clear that COVID will throw hundreds of millions of people back into poverty. It is an unprecedented challenge to our lives everywhere, but let me stress one aspect that also both ambassadors mentioned, that is that the challenge will not be equal for women and men. This pandemic has a very deep impact on women and girls and has really put decades of very, very hard-won progress on gender equality and on women's economic rights at risk. COVID has exposed but also reinforced some of the structural inequalities women and girls face. And just citing a few, because there's of course many, due to the prevailing gender norms, and the ambassador also referred to it, the burden of unpaid domestic work at home has increased for women around the globe in the context of the pandemic. We also know, as also mentioned, that women are more likely to work in the informal, low-paid, domestic and care jobs, the very jobs that are affected by this crisis. And these jobs offer actually very little legal and social protection. And this has meant that millions of women have lost their livelihoods overnight. Here in Latin America alone, there's about 19 million domestic workers, most of them women, and 80% of which do not have proper contracts. And amidst the pandemic, many of them have been laid off with no compensation and are, of course, not receiving their salary as they are able to arrive at their employer's house. So the pandemic, and maybe another gruesome statistic, the pandemic has also led to increased rates of gender-based violence, which, if I may say, even before COVID, we're at pandemic levels, with 1 in 3 women experiencing violence in their lifetime. So even pre-COVID, as also mentioned already, the World Economic Forum predicted that it would take actually 257 years before there was economic parity between women and men. So it is actually heartbreaking. On the one hand, really, it's amazing to see the results of the research that Solange presented. That is the amazing progress by 270,000 women entrepreneurs that have made such incredible progress. But it's heartbreaking to see that these gains may be at risk. Yet we actually know that it's precisely these women that hold the power to overcome this crisis. They are the ones that hold that power. We know from care experience that how essential women's contribution is to the recovery of communities following a crisis. In fact, when women get involved, we see much better results in responding to this crisis or any crisis we've seen from our past humanitarian work. Where women get involved in response to a crisis, there's increased cooperation within the community. Communities recover faster from the impact of a crisis, and also women take the opportunities of leading in the response to a crisis to also rethink traditional gender norms and roles, both in the communities but also at home. However, despite of the fact that women really hold the power to overcome this crisis, and especially women entrepreneurs, they are often not included in the response to this crisis. Just last week, actually, exactly last Tuesday, CARE released a report that is entitled, "Where Are the Women?" It shows that women only make out about 1/4 of national teams, like government teams, responding to COVID-19. So that, we know that by excluding women from decision-making teams, we're actually making slower progress in overcoming this crisis. But Reintje, let me turn to the second part of your question, which is, what can we do about it? And I think the most inspiring thing is that,
Sophia,
maybe
you can include you mentioned the report, and you mentioned the power that women have to lead in situations and in building back better. There is a gap there. If we see that it doesn't happen, women are not represented, and we know from our work on the ground that it's meaningful and powerful, how do we bridge that gap?
Well, thank you, Reintje. Actually, in terms of bridging the gap, I think it starts with women themselves, because we are already seeing that women entrepreneurs are supporting one another in each other through this crisis. So it starts there. And what we have to do, the community, is to support precisely these women. What can we do to support them? more purposefully, more deliberately, and with, much more energy from our part. I think what we need to do first and foremost is to really integrate a gender lens in everything we do. So with consultation in decision-making bodies, in processes, participation, that's key, especially since those women that hold the power to address this crisis are often not included. Another critical aspect already mentioned, but I really want to stress that, is of course, we need to support women-led micro and small enterprises as an explicit part of the COVID response. This is part of the COVID response. And maybe finally, another critical aspect is we actually need additional funding to respond to COVID-19. We see donors in funds to the crisis, but in many of these cases, these are funds that have been taken from other projects and budgets and programs, and that is probably may be having even unintended negative impact on gender equality. So, here we are reaching out to partners and feminists all over the world and are adapting our work to ensure progress on women's economic justice despite of the crisis. And we truly need to turn the stakes, not only despite of the crisis, but because of the crisis, because it has exposed this terrible impact that gender injustice has on women's economic opportunities and rights. And because it is a right to ensure women's voice and co-leadership in the economy, in society, in politics, and because also economic recovery along more equitable lines provides actually a real opportunity to accelerate economic growth. If women participated in the economy as much as men do, the activity could add an additional 28 trillion to GDP annually by 2025. So, 26% more. So not only is this the right thing to do, but it's the smart thing to do, Baintje.
Thank you so much, Sophia, for these additional points of view to what we've been discussing. And I totally agree with you that an additional thing needs to happen to make sure that what the crisis has now shown us, that where the gaps and the weak spots are, this is also an opportunity to now jointly start addressing the things that COVID-19 has so clearly exposed to us. We will definitely get back to you, Sophia. We have the opportunity to share some of the questions that we have in the meantime received from the audience, and there is many of them. An interesting one that I would like to ask, I'm going to start with Jorim since he's here with me at the table. If there was one thing that could structurally be improved as a result of the response that we have just been discussing, what would it be? One big structural change.
Yeah, I think for me it would be digitization for women. I think it's such an empowering thing. When they have actual access to digital services, digital financial services, and they can deliver their own services digitally. Mm-hmm. And also the learning and education access they would get as a result, I think that would make a massive difference.
Yeah. I'm actually going to ask this question to our other panelists as well. Sophia, what do you think one big structural change you could make today? What would it be?
Well, I definitely agree with digital means and the support for that. I would also add, if I may, the importance of engaging men and boys in this. This is absolutely critical. This cannot be, the burden cannot be on women alone. So supporting men and boys also to engage and be in solidarity with women's economic empowerment is central. So I think that's the one thing I would add, as well as, of course, access to loans through village savings and loans program. Also very critical. If I'm adding to the list, I'm sorry for that, but I think I have. So let me stop there.
We'll get back to you later. Maybe Marcus, because we're beginning to build a complete picture of the structural change that is required. Marcus, do you have an additional one thing you can change structurally?
Just one. So I would totally agree with both Sophia and Yoram. I think just to add to Yoram's point, one of the things that turns out to be really hard is the know your customer requirements that a lot of governments have, which then means that we need to not only help digitize female entrepreneurs, but we also have to help them get an ID card. So that's a sort of add-on to Yoram's point. And then the point I would add on my own is sort of broadening the safety net. This is a time where we can think about expanding safety net programs and thinking about them in a productive sense across the world, not just in developing world. I say that as an American. And we can use this opportunity to change those safety nets and in the process think about how they can make gender equality more of a reality.
Yeah, great, thank you. That paints like a nice complete picture of what we should do. The next question from Romina Rebora. How can we engage the financial and private sector in this discussion? The financial sector is sitting at my table here, and I don't know if you would want to. And maybe I should ask you, and I will get back to the others later about that. The private sector, there are so many companies who invest in the countries that the women that we have looked at live in, and that you also work with microfinance institutions in. How can we make sure that whatever we invest through financial services also resonates with private investments that others are making? Is there work being done to make sure that that connects with each other and connects with the women that we're discussing here?
Yeah, I think one crucial element is you have to speak each other's language.
Right.
And if you want to engage the financial sector, especially the private financial sector, you must also appeal to what the financial sector needs to know and hear in order to invest. And it ranges indeed from KYC, which is a real issue, how do you actually know that the person exists, to risk, and are they going to repay? Now we know actually that often female entrepreneurs have very, very good track records because they're a bit more conservative and borrow what they can repay. Mm-hmm. So how can you build really the evidence that it works? And that's what we're doing together with the leading banks. And then make sure you codify that so that others can follow and say, well, actually, this is a really good, healthy and conservative investment for a bank or a financing to do. So I think speaking the language also of the financial sector and to deliver the type of information that they need to be able to scale up is very important.
So again, this boils down to collaboration because the evidence is here on the table.
Exactly.
So we need to make sure that we translate that so that other banks can actually see, oh, is that what they're talking about?
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to continue with a next question that I saw on the screen already. Success stories in your experience of women in low-income and vulnerable communities forming sustainable networks to overcome their socioeconomic challenges. I would like to hear Marcus on this question. Because that's what you do, right?
Yeah, yes, it is what we do. I think if we go back to this business training in Togo that I was talking about, because the women who came out of that program were spectacular and inspirational. I think one of the things that happened during the program was they changed. This goes back to something Solange talked about. They changed their view of themselves as entrepreneurs, right? And so coming out of that program, they were much more likely to view their entrepreneurial role as central. And I think that really helped expand their businesses hugely. And working with each other and across, you started to see women who were previously catering, starting a cooking school, and women who had little boutiques moving boutiques into neighboring countries. Yeah. And so working across these networks, but getting that that seed from the training to grow this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Sophia will have something to say on also the role that networks and groups of women might play.
Yes, Reinke, actually, we've seen from all of our programs in the world that, the solidarity among women working, for example, the village savings and loans platforms are actually essential for this crisis. So, and that serves not only for, ensuring continued access to capital, but also for spreading messages around COVID and many others. So that solidarity and that group energy is critical to overcome the crisis. May I also say, in regard to the first question you asked, that this report says women mean business, but it's actually very important to stress that women also stay in business, that across 59 countries, the average global for discontinuing business is about 10% lower for women than for, so, women are also good customers of banks. So there's a lot of really good arguments, not only for women meaning business, women stay in business, but women are good customers. So, it's not only about supporting gender equality. This makes business sense.
Yeah. So what more evidence do we need? Thank you. Do we have time for one more question, or should I round this up? We have time for one more. I think that is the question of a million, and I think this is about, and I'm going to ask very brief responses from all our three panelists, very quick, because we don't have a lot of time. But this is exactly, I think, what we are seeing here today, that different types of stakeholders are already developing responses, each in their own rights, to support women under this crisis, women entrepreneurs in developing their enterprise and surviving the crisis and continue to develop. How do we work together? Jorim, what is required for us to come out of our silos and islands and to say we need each other? Let's join hands.
Very, very briefly, government, bring money. Civil society, bring knowledge, networks and strategies. Financial sector, leverage and scale up together. I think these are the three elements that now need to come together at speed.
At speed. Talk to each other is
absolutely,
the message, right?
And bring to the table what you have.
Thank you. Marcus, how do we work together? Fast.
I echo Jorim. Just an example from Malawi. Business registration alone for entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs, no impact, right? Registration wasn't the barrier. Business registration plus the establishment of a business bank account, right? Where the private sector worked with once you registered, they were there to train you on what a business bank account was, help you open it. Big impact on profits. So just an example of the kind of thing Jorim was talking about.
Yeah. Thank you, Marcus, and thank you, since this was the last question, to you for now. Thank you so much for collaborating with us and for being here today. I'm going to ask Sophia for a very brief remark on that very same question. What do we need to do for all these stakeholders to work together?
I would add, governments bring new money because we really need additional resources for this COVID response. Let's work together based on this amazing learning from this report. We know the formulas because, as Solange so well said, they have different ingredients. So let's use them to their full potential and extend. And of course, let's work in a joined up way to support those that hold the power, who are resilient to overcome this crisis. Our recovery in the Global South is dependent on this amazing women entrepreneurs.
Thank you, Sophia, and thank you all panelists for a fantastic input on this discussion. We're very happy to have had you with us. There are many more questions that I saw on the screen, and unfortunately we do need to start wrapping up this event. However, sorry I am about that. I'm very much enjoying this. So thank you again to the panelists. We now have again with us the ambassador, the Swedish ambassador, and I am going to ask her to give us some a comment, some remarks on what you have heard.
Well, first I must say that this has been a really depressing hour because, 25 years after Beijing, and that's when I started working with gender equality, we are still talking about the same questions, access to finance, legislation, investing in the giraffes, not the unicorns, and so on. At the same time, it's been a super inspiring hour because I really think that we have many of the answers and we have a commitment to really start making a change. So let's do that now. Let's go out there and make change. This is what we need to do.
Indeed, I think what we've seen, and with the data that we've been able to publish in the Women Mean Business report, the fact that women can double their earnings in a few years' time, and the very fact that these very same women are now facing the impact of the COVID-19 crisis, where, as Sophia said, there isn't so much new money being made available, but existing development funds being used for COVID-19, which will not nearly be enough for women to overcome this crisis. I think at the same time, there were some very good examples, and I agree with you. It's kind of depressing to see. We've been talking about this for how many years now, and what keeps us from doing this? And I think with today's discussion, I'm seeing a business case build up where it's really becoming a smart investment to do exactly this. And it will be an investment with financial returns, it will be an investment with social returns, and what else, what are we waiting for is the question that sticks to my mind. At the same time, what I think is encouraging is the fact that with these very different parties that we've had around the table today, that we are, although it's probably true what Joram says, that we're not entirely yet speaking each other's language, we're coming very close, and it cannot be difficult. So I'm also very happy, I'm very thankful to you and also to Lisa, to the Canadian ambassador, that we are kind of growing a coalition here of organizations that are working together, where we can support each other, and we will definitely call upon Marcus and Joram and other people to make sure, okay, what is the language that we need to say this in? Because the facts are there. So I would now like to thank you again and thank Lisa again for having us here, and all of you for being with us in this seminar. We would like to further continue this conversation and strengthening our joint efforts to achieve economic justice for women and rights for women. We've seen and we've heard from many of the panelists that this is a matter of being smart and being right, doing the right and the smart thing. And I would like to end this by again thanking the panelists, thanking all of you for joining us today from around the world. Again, a special thank you from the women entrepreneurs that joined us from around the world. And you will receive the Women Mean Business report via email if you subscribed to this webinar. So that you can see for yourself, the women who are featured in there have already shown that they are able to build their businesses and achieve sustainable results. They deserve to face fewer barriers in their entrepreneurship and to overcome the challenges that they are currently facing. And their call is very simple and very profound. Invest in us. Thank you to all of you.